Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our beginner class sew along. This is what, class 3?
3, I think, yeah.
This is class 3. So Twyla's on deck today, and she's going to show you a few different things. Accurate seams, ironing. What else was there? No,
Just a few things. We'll
go over it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so welcome. Who's going to be the first one on? I just want to see if we can see comments. So can somebody say hi? We want to make sure we can see you.
Did you have to change anything?
I had to say hi myself last time, so I'm going to say hi.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
That made a difference?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So I said hi. Can somebody say hi back? Oh my.
I can get my phone too, just to see if they're coming on my phone,
okay,
but not on there, because that'll tell us if we have an issue, right?
Yeah. We've got 17 on. I'd be surprised if somebody hasn't said hi. I might have to get her the phone.
Let's see. Yeah, according to this, there's 14. Oh, yeah, look.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. We're having issues again with comments.
Anyway, my phone can stay there, so
yeah,
that you can
I'll have
see
to keep
there.
watching the phone.
It won't scroll yet because that's where I just came
Okay.
on. So as they keep commenting, I think it'll show there. Okay.
Okay, everybody, we're gonna get going. Tomorrow, next week's class is our first class
Oh, right.
of the Christmas sew along. Guess what I got to work on today?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so we've had some people anxious to start that. Really excited about the sew along that we're just finishing up. We have really, Debbie Handspiker's pictures are amazing.
I know. And
love the backdrops.
who was the other one? I saw
Lynn,
that.
but there was another one.
Nora
done in
Dosett,
no,
maybe, was it?
I can't remember, but it was done
Was
in
that it?
teals
I
and
think it
stuff.
was. Nora Dosett.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just looking
Okay,
down at the
yeah.
phone to see messages. I'm just trying to see. Just let me frig for a second.
You'll probably stop the video.
Swipe left to see comments. Yeah, it's going again.
Okay.
Oh, there we see. I see Heather Wheatley. Is she the first one, or how low down is she on yours?
Right down there. Oh, you just...
Here we come. We got them.
Okay, man.
And that's just delayed.
That slow? Wow.
Okay, good.
Okay.
At least we can see the messages.
So we might be a bit slow answering your questions
Yes.
if it's that
So
delayed,
that's
right?
a reminder I wanted to say. When you guys ask a question, be specific. And after the video goes off, there's no good asking a question there because we don't see it.
We'd have to rewatch the video.
Yeah,
stuff
and so like some people are saying, what size is that? Well, that question is so vague because we talk about so many things.
And by the time we get see the question, we've moved on to maybe a different part, and we assume it's that part that you're asking about, and it was a part back away.
Hi,
right?
Janet. Hi, Mark. Oh, Mark was my savior. Up in Quilt Canada.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, we owe Mark big time. Anyway, so if you have a question, make sure it's a specific question, especially because of the delayed internet.
Yeah.
Okay, Twyla, you're going to be on here.
You guys are going to get tired of me yabbering on again today.
So we'll leave it there.
We're going to leave it there, but at some point she may have to like zero in on a few things or whatever.
Yes.
So we're just going to talk today about how to get an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance and some different methods. Just remember, and for all of you that are on, I see a lot of your names here, you're experienced sewers. So this is going to all be repeat for a lot of you, but this is the beginner series. So we are tackling this as if you haven't done much sewing or whatever. But remember,
Nancy Steves is on. She hasn't done much.
Oh no, maybe she'll get a few pointers. Did anybody see Nancy's pictures of her quilts she put in the exhibition? Like, she needs no pointers. So just keep in mind, though, that the things we tell you aren't carved in stone. Like, these are suggestions. These are options. Everybody needs to experiment and see what works best for them. What the method I use is definitely not the method Deb uses, or vice versa.
I know.
We are very different. We sew very different. And I'm sure, like, and neither Deb nor I are anywhere near as particular as Lynn.
Exactly.
Because Lynn loves to have a really perfect block. And some days I'm like that, and then some days I'm like, I cannot rip another
Some days
seam.
you're like Jenny Dome.
Yeah, some days it's
Oh,
like, let that
good.
sucker go. I'm not doing it again. So let's get started. So an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, for those of you who are just starting sewing, most machines, I shouldn't say all, but most machines have a mark on your, this is your throat plate off of your machine. And most machines have these markings. And one of these markings is marked your 1/4 inch. So a lot of times when you start sewing, you think, okay, that's what I'm following. And you can. But that doesn't mean it's accurate. In fact, I have 3 machines I checked last night at my place, and none of them are accurate on that line. So there are things that you can do. First off, there are special feet you can buy to get an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. So here's a few examples. Now I'm going to show you that what comes on some machines is what's called a scant 1/4 inch, which basically, I can't tell where to go. Here we go, there we are, is a scant 1/4 inch. So this is the side you'd be following. You would be sewing right along this edge. And that means that you're not going to get quite a 1/4 inch seam. And some people really like that because they feel that when they press their seam to one side, that being a little bit of a scant seam allows for the bulk of that fabric in the seam, and then you do end up with a true 1/4 inch. So that's what some people feel and some people like. So the difference between a scant 1/4 inch seam foot and a normal 1/4 inch seam foot.
There is a big difference.
There is a big difference. So do you see the difference there? On the side, can you point to which side it's this side over there?
Here, this
yes,
side,
is the side that your fabric would be following. So this is the true 1/4 inch seam foot. This is the scant 1/4 inch seam foot. So those are 2 options. So you just guide your fabric up along the edge of the foot.
A lot of patterns, but not all, as long as you're consistent.
Right, and we'll talk about that, and
okay.
I'll talk about like when that might not work.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm jumping the gun.
No, but that's a good point. So then there's the type foot that has a hangy downy thing.
A hangy downy thing? Which is right here.
So there's one there. So this one is a thinner one, which this is actually the one I prefer to use.
Really?
Mm-hmm. This is the one like Deb uses, and I have for my machine. So do you see how the hangy downy thing is like a bigger, thick?
There's nothing thin on me or about me.
Well, the only issue I have with this one is I find once in a while at the start it distorts your fabric a bit. It pushes it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do. But that's just me. So I do use it sometimes.
Good morning, Nancy.
So you guide your, I don't know how the best way to put this that you can see, your fabric.
You ride it against the bump.
Yeah, so your fabric is going to, right here. Your fabric is going to go right in here and ride right along in there without folding because you're...
And I find it so thick that it rides better than the thin ones.
And I like the thin one. I find this one works really well. So it's just, those are different styles. So you might need to experiment. Now, some machines come with a couple extra feet with them, but lots of times as a beginner, you're starting with a very basic machine and there may not be extra feet with it. But most machines, you can look online or look at a dealer and find feet that you can buy separately and attach to your machine.
I do have to say that if you're buying on Amazon or a store that isn't reputable, it's not as good.
So sometimes on Amazon or those places, it will say it fits a Singer, but it's not made by Singer. It's made by like a company that is not a Singer brand or whatever, and you may have issues with it. So you are better off. Although lots of times on Amazon you can find those brands, and they will say that they're true. But if you're looking on Amazon, read your description well, and look at your feedback. That's I find on Amazon, because lots of times people will comment in there. I bought this and it's not working well on my whatever machine.
Like it says made in China. I have 2 of these feet that I really like. One came from Amazon and one came from my dealer, and they're the world of difference.
Yeah. So that's one option. Probably not on most beginner machines unless you lucked out and had like a really nice machine or something, if you did other type of sewing before you were quilting. Some machines have the option to move your needle a hair. Like you can hit a button and move your needle over a hair.
I'm sure it's not a single hole plate.
Right, and I'll show that, right?
Okay.
So you can move, so if you test, and I'm going to tell you how to test, if you test and your seam isn't in the right spot, it's either too small or too big, if you have a machine that you can move your needle, just keep experimenting by nudging it over either way, a notch or two, and do your test that way. But, as Deb pointed out, this wasn't a good, I brought this one because it wasn't on my machine.
If somebody has a minute, can they report Mark Higgins? He's a spammer, and I'm unable to do it while we're live. Thanks.
Okay, so this is a single, what's called a single hole throat plate. A lot of machines have a wider hole there, especially if your machine does like a zigzag or a decorative stitch, because you have to have room for the needle to be able to go down, not just in one spot, but back and forth or whatever. So you can't adjust your needle if you can adjust your needle if you have one of these on, but you need to switch your throat plate. Okay, so that's one thing. There are then there are things that you can purchase that have nothing to do with feet or sewing machine parts that can guide you. So one thing is, this one is easy peasy. This is a magnetic seam guide that just sticks to your throat plate.
Which we don't have in stock, but we can order.
Yes. I will be truthful. I find these move.
Oh, do you?
I do.
I've never used them.
I do. I find they move. They may be good as long as you occasionally checked it, but it's easy to bump it or whatever and it will move. The other issue is they do tell you, I think, with some computerized machines that you aren't supposed to use magnetic things.
I read something on that.
Yes. So I don't know if that's really a thing. I have read that and I've heard feedback on that.
But
I know that on a mechanical machine, it's definitely safe.
On all the new computerized machines, they're safe.
They're safe. Well, that's good to know.
I read an article on it. Any of the newer machines are made to be able to handle magnets.
Mm-hmm. Good.
And I don't know what the year is, but any of the new ones are safe.
Thank you, Cheris. She did
And
that.
Dicey did too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So that's one option. Another option is this stuff that is called, it's made by Cluck Cluck Sew. It's called diagonal seam tape, I think is the official name for it. This you attach right to the bed of your machine. So the red line would line up with your needle. The red line would line up with your needle, and then you would put it down the bed of your machine perfectly straight. So in order to use this, the problem with some of these things that you buy is that if you don't place it accurately on your machine, it's not going to be any better than whatever. Like, you have to place it accurately. If you don't, your seam is still not going to be accurate. So like in the case of this or in the case of this. I used to find when I use this on one machine more than my others, when I put this, I would put this up at my needle. Then down here, I had a really nice perpendicular line that was on my machine, and I would put my square ruler, not one this big, but a square ruler down.
Do you want me to hold it?
Yes, a square ruler following that perpendicular line that was on my machine, and this was on my needle, and then lined it up so that this was perfectly straight there to get my 90-degree angle, and then I knew that my line was straight.
So Carmela said they don't stick good. I haven't heard that from anybody before.
I have the same piece of this on my machine for like over a year.
So when I look at that, do you find it hard to follow along? That black line looks pretty thick to me. Do you find it hard to jiggle in and out of that black line, or do you just follow the edge?
I follow just the inside edge is what I
edge?
follow, yeah, yeah. But I will tell you that when I put mine down, I cleaned my machine with an alcohol swab first before I put it down. I also read, someone else said that they take their hairdryer afterwards and give it a shot of heat because heat will usually, but I have had the same piece on that machine for over a year. Now it's getting pretty dug up because I sometimes push stuff with my point here and it digs it, but anyway. So that's an option. Another option is this gadget. So this is basically the same thing. This is the cutout where it would fit over your needle plate, if you can see that, right? And this one is easier to place, I find, because you have lines, and you can line one of these lines up with one of the lines on the needle plate, and that gives you a nice straight. And then you use, this isn't washi tape, I should have brought a roll of washi tape.
Oh, yeah.
Then you use washi tape to tape it down. I usually put one back here, one here, and one here. And washi tape, in case you guys don't know what that is, it's a tape that doesn't leave any residue when you pull it off or whatever. And I can use the same washi tape. I can pull this off. If I need to take this off for any reason, I can pull it off and sometimes use the washi tape like more than once, like the same tape on it or whatever.
We've got a lot of people waiting for that washi tape because a lot of people use that on their rulers too.
They do, to mark like if they're, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an option. So another option is when you're doing, this one. So we found this down in the States. And these little purple things, they peel off and you just take one of them. So like there's a seam that goes right down there. So there's actually, 5 in this package. You peel it off and it works the same idea, except in this case, you're going to put this 1/4 of an inch away from your needle, and then you have a bit of a lip. It's not flat like tape. It actually has a little bit of a lip, and then your fabric just rides up along that lip.
You've tried that. Do you like it?
I tried it. I did like it. I didn't mind it at all. And this you can restick a few times. So the issue I had with this, I'll be totally honest, is that when you are sewing straight seams, it was fine. But then when you go to do corner to corner, like a half square triangle, I found because it's got a lip, it was distorting the fabric on that side. So I found if you're pattern, you keep going back and forth between doing half square triangles and straight seams.
But you say you can pull it off?
You can pull it off, but then it's friggy putting it back on straight every time, right? But if you are a person who does, or if you're working with a pattern that has no diagonal, or you did all your half square triangles first. Yeah. Once you get to like putting rows together or just blocks together with sashing or whatever, this did work very well. So that was an option. So then another option is, where did I put that? When you're trying to get an accurate seam on like half square triangles. Don't tell me I didn't bring them.
You want me to go whip up a half square triangle?
Oh, I thought I brought them, but it's not really.
She brought her tipple trunk this
I
morning.
did. I brought my tipple. My tipple. Okay, here, I can show you on this. This isn't a perfectly square piece. But on this, if you are going to sew from corner to corner to do a half square triangle, there's 2 different methods that you can use. One is you're sewing from corner to corner and then you are cutting off the excess. The other one is you're making 2 half square triangles, in which case you use this ruler, you place it on one corner and the other corner, and you draw a line down either side, and that's your stitch line. Well, by drawing that line, you have a very accurate 1/4 inch to follow. So that really helps on, or if you're doing the single line from corner to corner, when you draw it, it gives you a very accurate stitch line to follow. Now, if you're using something like this, you might need to show this.
Okay.
Because it's hard to hold it up and show it.
I'm just going to cover the camera while we move around.
Okay.
Oh, I covered the camera, but
what did you cover?
Never mind.
Okay. So when you're sewing, if this is on your machine, is that going to show up there?
It is showing.
Okay.
Yep.
If this is on your machine and you're sewing, and this is your needle, so your needle would be in line with that middle line. That's how you placed it. You don't need to draw a line. That's one good thing about these. You line up that tip with your needle. This opposite tip, you're going to just follow it along that bottom line and feed it through. So you don't even have to look up here anymore where your needle is. Once you start and get your first stitch in there.
Just the bottom corner.
You're just going to get your needle in here. So I don't worry about this being anywhere when I start. I just get my needle in up here where it needs to get. Then you're going to swing this till that point is lined up with that. And then all you have to do is feed it through following that line. right there. Did that show?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no more marking
There's
lines.
no more marking lines. It is wonderful. So this method works for that, and this method works for that.
Yes.
So the other thing this does is if you're making 2 at a time instead of 1 at a time. So 1 at a time, you're stitching from here to here.
Yeah.
2 at a time, you're just going to move this over
And follow the other line.
and follow the outside line, your point, and then your needle is going to be stitching down that center line, which is where your line would be. And then you're going to put it over here, follow this line, and that's going to give you your line there. Is that making sense? So when you follow this line, when you're following your point on that outside line, you're actually stitching here to get your 1/4 inch.
Yeah.
When you move it over here, you're actually stitching in here when you follow this
and then
line.
just use a pair of scissors, or you can use the rotary
Or
cutter.
you can use the rotary cutter to snip in between. So that's ways to do your corner to corner accurately. Okay, what else have we got here? So I can throw this stuff back in.
See her pickle trunk?
Yeah.
When she comes through the door with that, you know you guys are in trouble.
Well, some days it's a bigger tickle trunk than that. Okay.
How much is that ruler? That ruler was like 10 or 12. I can't remember.
This one?
Yeah, it was.
It comes in different sizes. Let me see. If
She's gonna go see.
It comes in 2 lengths. That's the short one.
Do you like the short one better than the long one?
The long one is $10. This
Okay.
is the longer size, just so you see the difference. Well, no, I have both, but I just wanted to bring the shorter one because
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the longer one. It's 10. We don't have a short one there to look at the price. There's also this option, which does the same thing. When you peel this paper off, there's a line in the center of the ruler that shows you where to line it up instead of having that slot that you put on the corners.
The downfall is you can't draw.
A line in the center if you
center.
want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I rarely do that with
I
this
know
one.
because it's hard to get a pencil in it.
It is. I typically, if I'm drawing a line in the center, I typically just use the outside of this and put it from
Right there.
corner to corner and draw my line
Yeah,
that way.
that's the easiest
Yeah.
way.
So there's 2 different ones. This one is $10 as well. Okay, that's that.
I like the yellow one.
Do you?
I do.
Oh, I like the light
I don't
one.
like the line, the holes in the middle. I just feel like it's going to break.
Okay.
And I don't use
that
them
all the
anyway.
time anyway. Okay, so you had said, is it important, like why is having a 1/4 inch seam allowance really important, or does it matter if you're off a bit? So let's talk about that a little bit. If your block is accurate, when you go to put them together, if every block in your quilt is the same size, they're going to go together very nicely. If your blocks say, and I'll be honest, my blocks are never 100% accurate. I have a tendency to take a bigger seam allowance, and I find mine are always a hair small. Doesn't affect me, but as a new quilter, you may find it trickier to put things together. But what I want to show you is, if your seam allowance is accurate, this is 3 2-inch pieces, so that should measure 5 inches once they're sewn together. So when you put your ruler on, that one is 5 inches. It's accurate. If you have a piece that is off a bit, so this one, when I measure this one, it's off a bit. I did this with the scant foot. So I don't know if you can see there. Would the yellow show through better?
No, we're good.
We're actually 1/8 of an inch off from 5 inches.
And which foot did you use?
I used the scant.
Oh.
So that's 1/8 of an inch. But look at this one. This one should measure 5.5 when it's done, because those are 1.5-inch strips. And this one is off almost 1/4 of an inch.
What foot did you use for that?
I used the same foot. But you know why? Because if each seam is off a little, this block only has 2 seams. This block has 4 seams. So if each one is taking a bit more,
And overall in the whole quilt, you would have A big difference.
Yes, I didn't use the scant 1/4 inch on this. I used my line on my machine, on my throat plate for this, is what I used, because it made it took too much. Yeah, that's what I used on this. So this is where it makes a difference when you're piecing. If all of your blocks in your quilt are, say, 12.5-inch blocks, and it's the same block, and you are making, say, 5 rows across by 6 rows down, and every block didn't come out to 12.5 inches, they came out to 12.25, chances are you are consistently doing that on all 12 of the same block, all of your 12-inch blocks. They will go together beautifully. Where you may get into some issues if you're dealing with a quilt that has like a sampler type quilt with all different size blocks, with all different amounts of seams in the blocks.
That's where you're going to run
That's
into
where you may run into an issue. Because if one of your 12-inch blocks only has 4 seams going across it, and you're off a hair on 4 seams, but your next 12-inch block butting up against it has 8 seams in it, and they're all off a bit, that one's going to be a lot smaller than the first one that I just mentioned, and you may have trouble fitting those together. So that's where, as an experienced quilter, you learn to fudge, and we're going to get into that as we go along in this series. We're going to show you some ways to fudge things and how to fix when things don't go together perfectly. But that's why, as a beginning quilter, you will find if you can conquer the more accurate your 1/4 inch seam gets, the easier your quilt pieces are going to go together, and you'll run into less issues. But one of your big reasons why you're like, all of a sudden you think, okay, these are coming out really good, and then you throw in a different block and all of a sudden you're 1/4 inch shy, and you're like, I sewed with the same foot, I cut them all the same, why is this one smaller? Chances are it had a few more seams in that block compared to the last block that you did, and that's what makes a difference. The other place that makes a difference is when you get into angles. If you're doing blocks with like a 60-degree or a 45-degree or whatever, and your seam allowance isn't as accurate as it should be, and you start trying to line those up, those are going to get a bit trickier.
And that's what I'm running into trouble with my Alaska.
Right, yeah. But as a new quilter, you probably aren't going to be tackling many like 60-degree type or that type of blocks, and you will learn as you go how to work with that. But that's where you'll get into trouble. On a basic quilt with all the same size blocks, if your blocks are, say, 12.25 instead of 12.5, don't sweat the small stuff. They'll probably all fit together and work out fine. And there's always a bit of give when you go to pin them together. If one's a hair shorter, you may find you have to pin. Whereas an experienced quilter may not pin. They may just start it and give a tug here and a tug there, and it works together. But as a beginner quilter, you may find if your quilt blocks aren't the same size, you need to pin each end, pin the middle, and then stretch as you sew to make it fit. But start by conquering as close to an accurate 1/4 inch seam as you can. So one good way to test it is to cut like 3 strips, 2 inches wide, sew them together, press it, and if it's accurate, you should have, because this would be 2, 4, 6, that's 6 inches, but you have taken out 4 1/4 inch seam allowances there, which is totals an inch, so your block should measure exactly 5 inches if you're using an accurate 1/4 inch seam. So test that on your machine and see what you get. If it's smaller than that, obviously your seam allowance you're taking is a bit big, and you can try some of these options that we talked about to improve it. Or you can, some people even just stick a piece of painter's tape on the bed of their machine instead of these fancy things you buy. They just have a piece of blue painter's tape or green painter's tape that they stick on their machine where it needs to go.
One thing I do have to say though, if we mentioned moving the needle over to get the accurate, make sure when you shut your machine off you put a sticky note on your machine.
Yes.
Because if you come back to that project later and you forget to move your needle, but if you put a sticky note right by the on switch, you won't forget.
Yeah. I have sticky notes all over my...
Do you really?
All over my faff that I use for my applique. because I can never remember what settings I like.
Okay.
Like my length and my width. So I have sticky notes there that tells me when I'm
Yep.
doing such and such a project, this is what I use.
Wendy says she uses multiple layers of painter's tape works well too.
Oh, that would. So that would do the same idea
As the purple
as
things.
those purple things that had the little bit of a lip. These things.
Yeah.
Because that's what that does. It
That's
gives you
yeah.
that little bit of a lip, right? So, let's see. Let's see. So what else can affect block size? Other than,
Are you asking me?
well, I'm asking anybody. So your accurate 1/4 inch seam can affect your block size. So Deb, what else can affect your block size?
Ironing.
Says the queen of ironing.
Take it from mine.
So for you beginners who don't know, Deb is not an ironer. Okay, I'm going to apologize
Janet
right now.
Flynn says bias, and that's
Yeah, and
that's
I'm going to
true.
show that too.
Yeah.
So if Linda Lusby is watching, Linda, if I mess up and say ironing occasionally instead of pressing, I apologize.
There's
So,
a difference.
There is a difference, and quilters are supposed to press, not iron. So I just want to show you a few things for, so not pressing well is one thing. Like if you have a lot of bulk in your seams, that's going to eat up some of your,
Sheila wants to know if you ever starched before.
okay. I have. I am actually doing one quilt now that I'm starching because when I started with the fabric, I wasn't happy with how it was sewing, so starching helped. But I don't really stiffly starch. I know Lynn Noggle.
Yeah.
Lynn
Linda
Noggle
says
is a
Lynn.
huge, she tried it, I think after the Lisa Bonjean thing, when
Yes,
Lisa
I think
Bonjean
so.
talked at our retreat. I think Lynn tried it after that, and she's a firm believer in it now, I do believe.
Yeah.
I know it will make your blocks much more accurate. It does, because there's less wonkiness, bias,
Yeah.
whatever, less shifting when you sew, like it does.
And Nancy Steve says different fabric lines shrink differently.
They do. They do. So, pressing with steam versus not pressing with steam will make a difference in your block size. And I just want to show you.
But if you start with starch, you got to use starch through the whole quilt.
Yes, yes. So I want to show you about steam too, that if you are going to use an iron, I hope this is the one that fits on this. Yeah, it is. So these, I have a red and I have a white here, right? And they're cut to the same size. So if you just iron one of these without any steam or without any moisture or whatever, and you put it back on, I just want to show you that it doesn't shrink. It's still the same size as the fabric underneath it. If you take this one, this is just my Mr. bottle with water because this I knew wouldn't have water in it, and you give it a mist or a shot of heavy steam with your iron, and you iron it, and then you put it back on. I'm just showing you for comparison because I think you'll be able to see it against this red fabric. Look how much that piece shrunk. That was the same size
And
when
that
it
was
started.
just with iron.
That was just with water, not
I mean
starch.
with water,
With
yeah.
a mist of water. So if you're going to use steam in your iron, or if you're going to use a Mr. bottle to iron your blocks, you need to do it consistently because that one piece shrunk that much. So imagine if you have a block that's got a lot of those pieces and they all shrink that much, right? So there's nothing wrong with ironing with steam or pressing with steam or
Oops,
using a Mr. bottle to help flatten your block when you, which is what I use because I don't like to put water in my iron because I find that you sputter rusty spots eventually and it drives me crazy. Or some people will iron their finished block with like Best Press or Acorn Precision piecing fluid, some of those to get a nice flat block. Just do it consistently with all your blocks. Don't do some and not others, or you're going to get shrinkage on some. So if you have started with a perfectly square 12.5-inch block and your seam allowance was 100% accurate, and you steam or spray it with Best Press or something to flatten it, chances are it's not going to be 12.5 inches afterwards.
Lorraine says starching should be done before cutting. for precision to avoid shrink.
It should, yes. And if you starch, but what I'm talking about is more starching is usually done. You prepare your fabric, you starch it, you let it dry, you press it, and then you cut your pieces and you sew, is how most people starch. But some people like to use like the Best Press, just a squirt when they iron their finished block to help it lay flat, or to use a mister bottle. Those are the ones.
That'll shrink.
Yes. So if you have pre-starched before you've cut and sewn your blocks, then when you iron, even if you missed it or press it with steam, it's not going to shrink anymore because it's already shrunk. Okay? So that's one thing to remember. So ironing versus pressing will affect how accurate your block looks. So a really good example of that is, so when setting your seam, some people swear by it, some people never do it. I don't think you ever set a seam, do you?
Really?
I don't
You
think.
don't see everything I do.
Well, I know, but I'd be shocked if you set a seam. So setting a seam is when you take your iron and you just set it along your seam line. What it supposedly does, and I do believe it does this, is it makes the stitches sink down into the fabric more. And the way I think you can prove that to yourself, if you don't think it makes a difference, is sew two pieces, try to unpick one piece that hasn't had the seam set, and then try to unpick the piece that has, and it's harder to get your seam ripper into the stitch of the one that's had the seam set. So I do think it helps sink those stitches down in there a bit. So when you are, the correct way is you are supposed to press. So you're supposed to, after you set the seam, put this up, put your iron, rub it there, and then just set it there until it does its job. So put it here, put it up over the seam, and just set it there. You are not supposed to rock and do this and pull here and pull there and do all that, because especially on something with bias, if you start rocking your iron, this will quite often turn into almost like a miniature smiley face with the two corners going up a bit if you do too much of this rocking. So that is supposedly one of the things that you're not supposed to do, is do this on your quilt blocks. That being said, I'm guilty of doing that.
I like rocking iron.
Bulk in the seams will affect the size of your block. So, for example, any place you have a lot of points coming together, you are going to have a lot more bulkiness there, because here you only have 2 layers, and right here in the center you have, oh man, 1, 2, 3, 4, in one spot there's 6 layers all in that seam. So if those aren't pressed fairly well, you're going to take up a lot of, you're going to have a big hump. So this one, okay, where's Stephanie? She's going to be so proud of me.
You're using the pen.
Look at this.
It's the first time we've shown the pen, I think.
So this is the Acorn Precision Pen, which if you're a new sewer and you have starting to do any of these types of seams, this stuff works wonders. Without it, you have, I want to show you the difference. This one had this used on it. Can you see here that there's a lot more bulk where this meets?
Isn't that a cute block?
Because I didn't use the Acorn Precision Pin. This one has got less bulk. It's flatter than this one.
Pat, I'll come back to you.
So this thing works wonderful. Don't look at my smushed up tip. You can get replacement tips. After a while, this is what it gets to look like.
It shows that you use it.
It does. So if you put a daub of your liquid there, so this has the Acorn Precision Piecing Liquid in it, and this pen is refillable. And if you go, what one am I doing? This one. If you go back here and put a daub there and a daub in under there, and let that sink in, and then press it, that will take a lot of bulk.
Did you forget which one it is? It's the wet one.
It's the wet one right there. We have the lights off.
I find it shows better.
So look at the difference between that and these ones. There's like a big difference. And now this one does flatten it out a lot better. So that's one way, because every time you have your extra bulk in that seam, that's shrinking your block a bit. So if you have a block that has a lot, like this little block has got a lot of bulk in it in a lot of places. So that's one thing. So this is a good little tool.
Can I just ask you something
You
so we
can.
don't forget Pat? Pat says, can you show that again where you place iron on seam? Maybe that triangle? Yeah. Maybe this?
So set your seam.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I could turn it this way because I'm right-handed. So I peel this back. I use the edge of my iron to just gently go back against that fold there, and I just set it there. And then I do the same thing here and just set it there. What they say you're not supposed to do is this, right? Or to start right out doing that, like before I gently set the seam there and did the whatever. You're not supposed to be doing this. Because look at how much stretch there is in that bias. Like, look.
There is a
Boing, boing.
Yeah.
There's not much here.
Yeah.
But on the bias, there's a lot. So it's very easy on anything there that you start really rubbing and pressing and maneuvering to get that really wonky. And that's going to mess up your quilt.
Okay.
Okay. So another trick is the clapper. That helps flatten seams, because anytime you flatten seams, it's going to make your block more accurate or help keep it out. So a clapper is a piece of hardwood, for those new sewers who don't know what it is. It was originally used by tailors in clothes sewing, dressmaking, or whatever, garment sewing. It's hardwood, I think, oh darn, maple?
Yeah, I can't remember now.
There's one that they recommend is the best, but you can use, I think it's maple. So after you iron your block, press your block, and the heat's still in it, you put the clapper on it and you leave it on for a few seconds. The clapper absorbs the heat, and when the heat is drawn out into the wood, it helps the block lay flatter. Now, is it an extra step? Yes, it is. Does it work? Yes, it does. It works more efficiently if you're using steam, I find, but it still works with a dry iron.
Lynn says hers is oak, so oak is probably the
Oak
wood.
there is oak. There's one that's better, but any hardwood. What I'm getting at is don't use softwood. They say softwood will eventually crack from absorbing the heat over time or whatever, so it needs to be a dense hardwood. So you can purchase clappers. I know a lot of people, if their husband does woodworking and they have like any leftover oak or maple or whatever, they just get their husband to give them, but it has to be untreated wood. It can't be a piece that's been varnished or whatever. It has to be the natural wood that will absorb it. So between the weight and the heat being drawn out, it really helps to flatten that seam. It does work, but yes, it's time. I shouldn't say it's time consuming, because usually I do it in stages. Like if I have a bunch of these, this is what I do. If I have a bunch of half square triangles, I iron this one. Say I'm starting right from scratch and I'm ironing them all back. I keep my seam close to the one ahead of it, right there and there. I layer my next one. I flip it back, press, iron. I'll admit I iron, I don't press. Then my clapper will cover all three of those and draw it out. So you don't have to do them one at a time.
Debbie Landry says softwood also has sap in it, so it could steam.
That's probably true. That's probably true. So what else? Is there anything else? Oh, okay. This is one that probably people don't even think about. Thread can affect your seam thickness. So, Deb, come up here so they can see this. I don't know if they're going to be able to see it. I wish I had something darker. I wonder if it'll show on there. So this is, I just want you to see, well, good heavens. There we go. Look at the difference in how thick that piece of thread is. I'm tied to the thread. Versus how thick that thread is. Is that showing?
Yes, it is.
Is that showing up?
It's showing.
So imagine if you have both of these in your seam versus both of these, or like one of each or whatever. That will make a difference in your seam. And I know that sounds crazy, but it does actually make a difference. These are the pre-wound bobbins. And if I don't have a color that I need in pre-wound and I wind my own with a normal thread that's thicker, I see a difference on those blocks. So that's another thing that will make a difference. There's no right or wrong. Use whatever you like. But I'm just giving you some information.
Whatever one you use, be consistent if you've come to a method of using your 1/4 inch guide.
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah. The thinner thread sinks into the fabric more, especially when you press it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whereas this has a tendency, your thicker weights, to sit on top and never become part of it or whatever.
Yeah.
Another thing you can do is press open in a really bulky area, like especially small blocks. Now, I know there are those of you out there that the minute I said press open, somebody probably went, so, because for years that was a big no-no in quilting. But I just want to point out that over the years, people have come to realize, or a lot of people have come to change their ways, and people are now pressing open. A lot of the famous sewers and designers press open. And one article I read said that one of the reasons that it's safer nowadays is that thread quality has improved so much more compared to, 40, 30, 25 years ago, that it's much better. Now people say, well, what if I stitch in the ditch and go over that? Won't that make that break? I have got quilts there that I've stitched in the ditch, like quite old, and they've been washed a lot and they're fine. But I will tell you that if you're going to do that, you should shorten your stitch length. So I have 2 here, and I don't know if it's going to show, Deb.
I've got a couple of questions we got to go back to. But.
So this one, I stitch with a really short stitch length anyway, because I don't like to backstitch at the start of my things. And I find if you have a looser one, that when you go to put your pieces together, they come undone. And see, this one isn't coming undone. I stitch with a 1.5, which is really...
Do you really?
Yeah, I do. So this one is pressed open.
That slows you down,
Not on those industrial machines, it doesn't. When those suckers can do 3,000 or 5,000 stitches a minute, it doesn't slow you down much. So if you look at that, you're not seeing any stitches when I pull. That isn't weak in that seam, even though it's pressed open, or I don't find it is.
It's not when you've got that small of a stitch.
So this stitch length, can you see it? I don't know if you can even see it.
Yeah, you can.
That one is around, I think, a 2.5. And it's, can you see the stitches?
You can.
So I do think that if I was a person that was going to start pressing open, I would shorten my stitch length. And I think that that would solve any issues that you had. But in bulky little blocks, like if you're doing miniatures like Nancy Steve's, lots of times you have to press open.
But you can't nest with open.
You can't. And we're going to get into nesting for those of you who are beginners and you don't know what that term means. We're going to get into that. So yes, with open seams, you will probably find you have to pin more or be more careful when you're sewing that your seams line up.
Janet is wondering, what kind of thread weight do you prefer? Do you have a preference?
I use glide.
I do too.
I do. So the glide, what is it? I can't remember. 50 or 60?
It's a 40.
40. Right. The other one is the quilting one that
60.
we use on the long arm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I use glide for everything, and I know a lot of people prefer. What is Orifil? What weight is Orifil?
It's a 40.
It's a 40 as well.
I'm pretty sure.
I don't know. Let me look.
Yeah, you want to grab
Let's
one?
grab one and see what it is.
Just a second.
Because a lot of people, so that's a really good question, because a lot of people don't sew with polyester, they sew with cotton, and that is a preference.
There's a lot of numbers on there.
It's a 50,
Okay.
I think. Wait. I can't, the friggin' plastic is folded right over where I need to look.
Friggin' plastic.
No, it's a third. Is that a 30?
Let me see one. No.
No. Where is it?
It's a
50. It's a 50.
Yeah, Janet's saying,
Yeah.
so this is a 50, but Orifil makes all weights. The
They do.
one I've decided to carry is the
Yeah.
50 weight because Orifil says that's the most popular for piecing and
Right.
the best.
Yeah. So, cotton and polyester is another debate that you're going to hear from people, right? Some people will not piece with anything but cotton. Again, I think that the newer polyester threads are definitely better than when they first came out with polyester years ago. And I now prefer the polyester. And I prefer the glide mainly because it makes way less lint in your machine.
So Peggy, not all Aurifil is 50, but that's what we carry, and
Yeah.
that's the common
Aurifil
one.
has, if you look at your spools, they're different colors. So any Aurifil spool that is orange would be a 50 weight.
Yeah.
Is it the green? I think
Green
is
the thicker.
thicker. So
it would probably be the 40. I got a chart over there.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's it goes by the color of the spool.
yeah. Susan wants to know which is stronger and will wear better. We think that the glide is stronger than cotton, but you know what? They're all pretty good. They're all pretty strong once they get stitched in there.
If you look at old quilts, rarely is it the seams that come apart.
I know.
It's the binding
fabric
wears out or the fabric wears out before the thread gives.
So although it's a big topic and a lot of people get all worked up about it, it's not a big deal.
Like I've got quilts well over 25 years old, and it's like the binding is threadbare. Nothing is unstitched.
Yeah.
And years ago, when they said don't press your seams open or whatever, they were also hand stitching a lot.
That's true.
And
too.
hand stitching isn't as uniform, and probably in a lot of cases
tiny.
wasn't as tiny as machine stitching and consistent as machine stitching can be too. So there's both sides of that argument. All I can say, it's like any other thing with sewing. You
Decide for
do you,
yourself.
you try, you experiment, and whatever works for you is right for you.
Janet wants to know what the date of our next beginner class. That's a good question because
Yes, it is.
because we had decided it was going to be the first Wednesday of every month, but because of summer and being away
and vacations, and
it will be when it will be for the next little bit until we get into a we'll do it once a month, but we're not sure,
so
and we'll try to post it.
We will try to give you some heads up, like at least a week before, maybe two, like when we're going to do it. But it definitely isn't next week. Next week is the start of the Christmas season.
I know.
Okay, guys, I think I've babbled on enough. So
it's great, Twyla. Thank you.
Okay, everybody have a great day.
Okay, see you, everybody.
Bye-bye.